One of the specific things that the federal court said was, by attacking bank accounts, it was a sloppy, broad brush that punished people imprecisely. Entire families would be destroyed because one person was targeted. I mean, a lot of people have family joint bank accounts between spouses, but all of a sudden the mom can't afford groceries or school costs. That was something specifically mentioned by the federal court. Is that reflected in your lawsuits today?
Yes. And so what we've done is any of the people that I represent that had joint accounts. So one of our clients, her accounts were frozen, but she had a joint account with her adult daughter. So we've sued on her behalf as well, because they were all punished equally. People who weren't even in Ottawa or close to Ottawa had their bank accounts frozen. And Justice Mosley was very concerned about that. He cited that as an example in his decision.
The idea of collective punishment is not a concept in Canadian law. It's not a concept in Western law. That's a barbaric form of punishment. And that's what the government of Canada chose. I'd like to walk through the lawsuit because our viewers, although most of them are not lawyers, I think they're familiar with lawsuits, and they understand that lawsuits are a tool that you need sometimes to correct outrageous acts of public policy. So I would like to now walk through the filed lawsuit that was filed this morning in Alberta on behalf of Tamara Lich and her husband, Dwayne. So we're going to show this on the screen. You can see the stamp in the top right-hand corner, Tamara Lich and Dwayne Lich. And I'll just skip over some of those preamble, and then I'll just come to the party. So I'm just going to read, I'll read a paragraph, or I might skip over some of the more administrative ones, and then I'll ask you to give some expansion of these, because I think it's very interesting to see the primary documents. And by the way, I don't know if the regime media, if the CBC are going to cover these things fairly. They might, by the way. I don't want to prejudge, but I don't know if they will. So let's just jump right in. The parties. The plaintiff, Tamara Lee Lich, is an individual, Canadian citizen and resident of the city of Medicine Hat in Alberta. The plaintiff, Dwayne Lich, is an individual, Canadian citizen and a resident of the city of Medicine Hat in Alberta, and is the spouse of the plaintiff, Tamara Lich, hereinafter collectively referred to as the plaintiffs. The plaintiffs have 5 children and 4 grandchildren. So you're just describing who they are. I think that's sort of obvious. The defendants are...
Well, the reason that's important, I'm going to stop you right there, because that's critically important. I won't stop you on every one, is those are the people they needed to care for.
Right.
Those are the people that they could not care for.
Wow.
Tom Marazzo has a son, and this is in his lawsuit, and it's explained, and Tom has spoken publicly about this, so I know that he will be okay, and with me telling you and your viewers this. His son has a severe genetic-based heart issue, and during this period of time where his account was frozen, he needed on an emergency basis to get a prescription filled for his son's heart.
Wow.
He couldn't.
Wow. Huh. Well, thank you for that interruption. That was a very useful, I mean, that's why it's relevant. You've got 5 kids and 4 grandkids. It's very relevant because they were the punching bag for this government too.
That was the fear of my clients, is that they felt so isolated, so overwhelmed. It's like, oh my God, what's going to happen to our mortgage, our car payment, our insurance payment? We can't get gas. We can't buy food. We can't even move. We can't move, like move as in terms of physically transport ourselves.
Yeah. Now, paragraph 3 is a little bit technical, but I'll read it anyways. The defendants are His Majesty the King and the Attorney General of Canada, being the statutory nominee of His Majesty, who proceedings against the Crown may be taken in the name of, pursuant to Section 23(1) of the Crown Liability and Proceedings Act. So that's basic. When you're suing the government, you say you're suing the king. Obviously, it's got nothing to do with King Charles, but you can sue the government for wrongdoing, and we have the proof of the wrongdoing in the form of the federal court. So this is how you go about suing the feds, basically, is what this paragraph is, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Background. On or about February 15th, 2022, at the request of the Government of Canada, all of the plaintiffs' personal accounts at the Toronto Dominion Bank including related debt cards, ATM access, and credit card services, were frozen without notice. The plaintiffs were unable to withdraw or deposit money from the frozen accounts or make credit card purchases, and any automatic payments associated with the frozen accounts were canceled. That's terrifying, that automatic payments, like a lot of people set up their phone bills or their utility bills or even their mortgage on an automatic payment. That's frozen too, eh?
Everything. And they couldn't, and they couldn't get paid.
They couldn't get paid. You know what? I dare say that most people, if their bank account was frozen, within 2 weeks, they would be in a crisis of some sort. They would miss a mortgage payment. They would miss a payment. Things would be starting to shut down in their lives. But before I move on to the next paragraph, this was February 15th, and it's no coincidence that today is the last day for the 2-year period, because in law, there's certain limitations. You have to move quickly on your rights. And today is basically the last day to sue the government to be sure you're within the 2-year window. There may be some arguments that, you could do so a little bit later because the damage is continued later, et cetera. But by suing today, a day before the second anniversary, you are ensuring that you're within the 2-year time period, right?
That's right. I mean, there's a good argument, Ezra, and last time you interviewed me on the federal court decision on the EA, I mentioned that, you could argue that the limitation period starts to run from when Justice Mosley released his decision. However, as an experienced litigator, you want to avoid issues. So if you can file before the earliest conceivable possible limitation period, then you don't have to waste time. And the other side, in the government, when you're fighting the federal government, they have unlimited resources. So even if they have a 5% chance on knocking you on a limitation argument, they're going to run it, and they're going to make you spend money for your clients. So.
And I don't want to dissuade other people from taking legal action, because I think it could easily be argued that
me too.
The pain and damages and punishments continued. It wasn't just Feb 15. It was Feb 16, Feb 17, Feb 18. I forget exactly how long it was. So obviously it's not over yet, but do not sit on your rights. Okay, I'll keep reading. The plaintiffs were not notified of the freeze on the frozen accounts, the reason for the freeze, or how long the freeze period would last. They first realized the frozen accounts were frozen when their debit cards and credit cards were declined and payments were rejected. How do you eat? So many people don't even carry cash anymore. They just beep with their Google Pay or Apple Pay, or just tap with a card. I used to walk around with $100 in my pocket. You never know what for, a cab or a meal. I think a lot of people go out with any cash, without any cash at all. That could, you might not even be able to eat that day if your credit cards are all frozen.
And the next thing you're going to do is look at your gas gauge.
Right.
And you're going to hope it's close to a full tank, because you're not getting fuel.
Right. Okay, I'll keep going. The government of Canada's freezing the plaintiffs' accounts caused immediate financial instability and fear. I bet you. And I think that's one of the reasons they did it, a psyop to terrify people. There was a lot of that going on during the lockdowns, that outrageous interim police chief in Ottawa who threatened any donor, we're going to track you down. A lot of the abuse was theatrical to terrify people. I think it was a form of terrorizing others so they don't step out of line. Let me keep reading your lawsuit. The plaintiffs were unable to access funds necessary for daily living expenses, purchase food, fuel, medicines, bill payments, and other essential services. This disruption deprived the plaintiffs of the ability to conduct basic financial transactions and live normal lives, leading to severe inconvenience, hardship, embarrassment. That's another thing, too. I mean, it's embarrassing when you can't pay a bill. You're embarrassed to the person, you go to a restaurant, your credit card's declined. That's an abominable embarrassment.
Or the lineup at the grocery store with the kids and the carts loaded with the bagged groceries, and everybody's getting impatient because the calls I was getting in Ottawa at the time from spouses back home was they would try their credit card number one, their credit card number two, and then their debit card. Yeah, and every time they try it, and then the cashier would grab it and rub it on their sleeve and try and stick it in.
And it would be a whole thing.
And then having to leave with the kids with no groceries.
Oh, boy. And I'll finish the sentence in your lawsuit, leading to severe inconvenience, hardship, embarrassment, exclusion from modern society, and damaged personal and business relationships. I can only imagine. I mean, It doesn't happen to me often, but every once in a while, a credit card I use has declined, and I am deeply embarrassed. I'm embarrassed for myself. I'm embarrassed that I put the other person through this. And I can imagine if I was shut down in every single way and you can't go to an ATM, like you would be scared. I mean, I guess you would call your closest friend and say, "Can I borrow some cash?" But but even that. Okay, I'll keep going. Paragraph 8, the plaintiffs also suffered and experienced fear and anxiety due to the anticipated loss of income due to the freezes, as salary, wage, and payments were directed to the frozen accounts, causing delays in meeting financial obligations such as rent, mortgage payments, and loan repayments. Additionally, the freeze resulted in accrued fees, yeah, of course, penalties, and interest charges on outstanding balances, exacerbating the financial strain. Well, I think that speaks for itself. Do you have anything to add there, or should I keep going?
Keep going.
Okay. You know what? And I'm not going to read every word of this because some of it is a little bit technical, but I think that this is a good reminder of what it was like. And it's been 2 years and most people don't wear masks anymore. And I don't think people follow the 6 feet of separation rule anymore. And no one's banned from flying on planes anymore because they're unjabbed. So a lot of us has moved on, and the body heals, the mind heals, and we forget what it was like. But at the time, it was a crisis. It felt terrifying, and I can only imagine. And by the way, we didn't know if it was going to get worse or better. We didn't know how long the Emergencies Act would be in effect, and was this just the first step? By the way, I remember the media party wanted more. They wanted the government to go harder, by the way. Okay, let me get back to your lawsuit. The plaintiffs state that the Government of Canada initiated the freezing of bank accounts and credit cards for the improper purpose of dissuading and punishing the plaintiffs for their exercising of fundamental charter rights in the form of protesting government COVID-19 mandates and restrictions. The plaintiffs continue to suffer negative effects from the frozen account, really, to this day, including rejection of business funding applications. I bet, because of course you've got all these black marks in your credit now. Rejection of business funding applications and the necessity to secure a loan through a lease company at a high interest rate with full collateral. So that's still going on. Representatives for the banks have stated the plaintiffs' bank accounts will be marked indefinitely into the future, affecting their ability to conduct normal banking and financing. And banks, once they have something on you, you're never purging that from their files. I mean, and banks are tough to deal with at the best of times.
On March 7th, 2022, the Senior Vice President and General Counsel for the Canadian Bankers Association testified before the House of Commons Committee on Finance. And she was asked this a number of times, and she volunteered, because she was asked by some of the members of Parliament on that committee, as to whether there would be any lasting effect to those Canadians, including my clients, who had their bank accounts frozen. And she said, yes, the accounts will be marked for life.
I know
words,
a little,
not mine.
Yeah, I know a little bit about being debanked. I don't know if you remember the story a couple of years ago. Rebel News applied for a mortgage at the Royal Bank, and they were thrilled to give it to us. They told us that on the phone, but then they checked with their headquarters, and for political reasons, they denied us, and that was painful to me. But it was just an idea for an office, and I mean, I guess I got over it. But I was still very mad at them. But that's at the best of times. And if you've got this mark on you that the finance minister called the bank and said, this is a bad dude, you're never getting that mark of Cain off of you.